big concept that has made such a difference in my life, in the way I am with others, and in particular, the way I am with people that I love, is this concept of detachment. And what detachment really is about is knowing what's mine and what's not mine. When I was applying it to alcoholism early on, detachment was seeing my loved one separately from her disease and the actions that her disease brought to her. To understand that the way she was acting was not because that was her, but because that was her disease acting. And being able then to love the person while still hating the behavior.
Well, hello, friends of Bill W. and other friends. You have landed on Sober Speak. My name is John M. I am an alcoholic, and we are glad you are all here, especially newcomers. Newcomers, that is, both to recovery as a whole and newcomers to this podcast. Sober Speak is a podcast about recovery centered around the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. My job here on Sober Speak is simple. My job is to provide a platform to the amazing stories of recovery all around us. Consider Sober Speak, if you will, your meeting between meetings. Please remember, we do not speak for AA or any 12-step community. We represent only ourselves. We are here to share our experience, strength, and hope with those who wish to come along for the ride. Take what you want and leave the rest at the curb for the trash man to pick up. From Studio AA, deep in the heart of Texas, that was our friend Spencer T. that you heard at the beginning of this episode, and you are going to hear so much more from Spencer in just a moment. But first things first, this here episode is brought to you by, this here episode is made possible by Tim, Laura, and Brad. What, you may ask, did Tim, Laura, and Brad do? Well, they visited our humble little website, www.soberspeak.com. They clicked on that little yellow donate tab, and they made a contribution. So thank you so much, Tim, Laura, and Brad. This here episode is coming right out to you'ns. All right, so this is a follow-up to our episode we had last week. It was called Spencer T. in All Our Affairs, Part 1. And this, I'm very original here, is called Spencer T. in All Our Affairs, Part 2. Spencer, who many of you may know, is from Ann Arbor, Michigan. And we are going to pick up on this conversation right where we left off last week. So I guess it's not as smooth as silk blast off as I would like it to be, but we make it work. So this week, Spencer discusses his mother's last words prior to her passing. And he discusses the subject of radical acceptance, how recovery opened up his emotional life, how he uses the 12 steps on a daily basis. And he covers the subject of maintaining spiritual fitness and what he describes as the, quote, big change, unquote, in his life. Spencer discusses the hula hoop and what that means, the subject of detachment, as you may have heard on the opening audio. And we even have some bonus audio, bonus footage, whatever you want to call it, and much, much moss. And if you want to and are interested in listening to other episodes by Spencer on the Sober Speak podcast, you can listen to episode number 25, episode number 82, and episode number 131, where Spencer has been on in the past. And of course, if you want to hear even more of Spencer, You can find him at The Recovery Show, and that can be found wherever you listen to podcasts. Both his site, it's called therecoveryshow.com, and the podcasts are chock full of nuts with mainly very helpful Al-Anon information. And I encourage you to stop on by and visit either his website and or listen to the podcast. Well, enjoy, Spencer, and we will have plenty listener feedback at the end of this episode. Enjoy.
Yeah, so I played this CD on Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. Some of you may know Tara Brach, B-R-A-C-H.
Oh, yeah. I listened to her
exactly.
meditations. Yeah.
Yeah, she does meditations. I called 2 or 3 program friends as I was driving, hands-free on a speakerphone, right? And because that's what I needed to do for my own serenity. The third thing that I was going to talk about played out over a much longer time span, and that had to do with my parents as they aged.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about that.
As their dementia developed, both of them at the end had pretty severe dementia. My father actually, before he died, I forget the term, but he couldn't form words. He started out by just losing some words, and he lost more words, and by the end, he could just make sort of mumble noises, and he could get some communication, but we were never quite sure what it was he really wanted.
Mm.
My mother's and his dementia developed quickly over the space of 3 to 4 years, maybe. I don't know, because my denial may have missed the beginning of it, right? My mother's was slower and not as deep, but she had all the symptoms of not remembering what just happened. And she unfortunately turned into a very angry person, as sometimes happens. And I wonder, was that always there and it was just covered up by her codependency, her people pleasing? Or is this something that really was a change? And I don't know. It doesn't matter. And I got triggered by these dementia behaviors because some of them were very similar to alcoholic behaviors.
Right.
And I had to reuse that program in this new place, in this new way. And that same time when I drove my kid to Connecticut, that summer we had not gone to visit my parents. And we always went to visit my parents every summer. And that summer we had not gone. And part of the reason we had not gone, I'm sure we had other reasons, stuff was happening, whatever. But I just didn't want to see my mother in the state she was in. And so I'm driving back from Connecticut, and one of the routes driving back from Connecticut basically goes right past my parents' house. I'm like, I need to stop. This is not good. I need to somehow be able to live with this because I don't want to cut them off. So that was the other reason for the Radical Acceptance CD, and we were going to meet for dinner at a restaurant, and then I was going to go back and spend the night at their house before driving the rest of the way home. And I got to say, doing that trip in 2 days is much easier than doing 750 miles in one day. Okay. And so I got to the restaurant, and they weren't there yet. But this was a place that they really liked. The people who owned the restaurant knew them, And when I said, yeah, I'm meeting my parents, I think they're running a little late. And she looked at me and she said, "Oh, you're Woody and Marilyn's boy." Okay. I was 60 what? But I'm their boy.
Yeah.
And they showed up, and this restaurant was in an old house that had, steps up to a porch, and they got out the ramp so that my mother could come up with her walker, and then going through, it's kind of a cramped place. And so she's maneuvering herself slowly through, and all the people at these tables are graciously getting up and moving out of her way. And I realized that they're not having the same emotional reaction to this that I am.
Right.
They're seeing somebody who needs a little help.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing somebody who is dying, who is not the mother that I grew up with. And I had told myself before coming in that I was going to enjoy whatever happens, that I was not going to have expectations about the way things were going to happen. And as it turned out, that's probably a good thing. She ordered something. When it came, she couldn't remember what she had ordered. I mean, just like those things could have just set me off, and they didn't, because I had done the spiritual work ahead of time to be able to be there and to see her for who she was at that moment, and to enjoy spending time with my parents. Cutting a long story shorter, they died in 2021, both at home with people who loved them around them. I was not able to be there for my father. He died the day before I got there. I was there 10 months later when my mother passed. And she had gone to the hospital for some sort of minor thing, but they needed to do something. And being in the hospital, and they pumped her full of fluids and stuff, and she kind of perked up a little bit, and I thought, okay, maybe I didn't really need to come. We got her home. My brother tells this part because I wasn't there for it. I was at the Walgreens or whatever getting some stuff, right? He got home. She was asleep in this passenger seat. And so he just left her there. And then when she woke up, he helped her out, and she looked up and she said, "Beautiful blue sky."
Mm-hmm.
Those were the last words she spoke, except maybe no, which was one of those things that, no, I don't want this, no. But that, I take those as her last words. And, to be able to be there for that, to be able to be present for that is a miracle. I wouldn't give it away for anything. And that evening she went to sleep. The next morning, the hospice people came with the hospital bed and the morphine and all that good stuff. And she never woke up. And that evening, my brother was living with them at this point. He was managing a team of caregivers because they needed 24-hour care. Well, I guess at that point it was just my mother, but she needed 24-hour care, and he couldn't give 24-hour care, right? So the caregiver, who she hadn't seen since like the week before, came that night. She and my brother went in, gave my mother morphine preparatory to turning her, because you got to, somebody can't turn themselves over. You got to do that, or else they get bed sores and all that fun stuff. Mm-hmm. They went back to turn her, and she was gone. Both of them went when nobody was in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Like, did they know?
Yeah.
Maybe they did. Maybe this was one last something. I mean, I know people, I've talked to people who've been there, when their loved one passed, and that's a very, moving experience. Being there being able to say goodbye, even if I'm not there at the moment, I'm just grateful that I was able to do that.
Yeah.
You know, when my father's father died, he gave a eulogy for his father, right? And I read that and I thought, I don't know if I could ever write something, give something like this. And then, in 2021, I had to do it twice, right? It was for my mother, it made me look at her as who she was, not as a mother, not as a wife, but as a person, like who is this person? Because as a child, you look at your parents, I look at my parents, and they play this role of parent. And her role of parent was a very traditional, I was born in 1955. They were married in 1952. So it was this very traditional family role. She was the homemaker. She had dinner on the table every night at 6:00. My father went off to work and came home, and, he had a closet full of suit coats and ties, and he got his shirts done at the laundry, and they came home all pressed and folded. And, it was very traditional. And so to spend a little bit of time thinking about who was she as a person was, I don't know why it's not something I ever really did before, right? Like, and it was easier for my father because he had very obvious accomplishments in his life. And for her, I had to take that time to say, who is this person? And what did she give to me? Because I was able to say, my father gave me this ability to do things, to build stuff, and to know that if I wanted to do it, I could probably do it. He gave me my love of photography, but what did she give me? And I concluded that one of the things she gave me was love, both as a person to me, but also love as an example of how to be in the world. Hmm. Would I have seen that? Would I have been able to say that without having 19 years of recovery under my belt at that point? I don't know. But I know it was a lot easier. It was a lot easier to be open and vulnerable, standing in front of, and for my mother's, we did her memorial service in person. So standing in front of a bunch of people that she was in their lives too. My father's, we did it online because February of 2021, things were still,
right.
And I mean, there was also a plus to that, which is that his brother and his brother's family, who do not live anywhere near us, one of them lives in Denmark, the rest of them on the West Coast, and one of them's in Australia, were able to attend. My mother's not so much. Well, I think they put it on like YouTube or something. They streamed it so people. But with the virtual service for my father, we could actually have people who were not there speak to it, speak in it. So they both had their things. And then, I don't know, I just feel like recovery opened up my emotional life from it just wasn't as open. I wasn't, I don't know. I can't really put it in words, but I just know that that would have been a very different experience without the tools and the attitudes and the spiritual connection that I got from not knowing what to do about my wife's drinking. I mean,
Right.
how does that happen? How does that happen?
So we kind of started, or I said, you kind of started talking about the, practicing these principles in all our affairs.
Yeah.
If you were able to kind of put a bow on that particular thought, what would you say?
The short term, the short answer is that I take the 12 steps and I use them on a daily basis. When something happens that I have been maybe acting out of, I'll say, a character defect, to use that terminology, I can recognize that it happened. And I view that as step one. Like, I admit that it happened. As much as I might want it to have not have happened, it happened. I know that there is help available, step two, if I want to ask for it, step three. I may have to take some time to really look at what was going on with me. Why did I act out in this way? Why did I cut off my coworker who was trying to explain something that I already knew? I may have to take a little bit of time to understand what was happening, and that's step four. And then I may need to talk about it to somebody else, at least to myself and God, if not another person. If I'm acting out of an identified character defect from step five, then I have to be ready to let go of it, and I have to ask my higher power with help. I was impatient again. Please help me be more patient. If I need to make amends, I can do that. And I very often do. This whole process can take 5 minutes. It can take a couple days. I think there probably have been times when it was longer than that, I know there have been, okay? But it gives me the 12 steps, at least the first 9, which I see as the working of the program. 10 and 11 and 12 keep me in maintaining my spiritual fitness, right? Those steps are a way to live my life. There's also the change in attitude, the change in the way that I am in the world, which is partly the steps, but the change in the way that I interact with the world and that I express myself. There's a whole bunch of things there, but that come from lots of hearing other people's experience, strength, and hope, and saying, yeah, I could do that. That could work for me. Or my favorite is, I never thought of that. I never thought of doing it that way. I'm going to have to try that. And that has happened so many times over the years. And the big thing, the big change for me that Al-Anon has given me is the knowing who I am not, and being able to see what the extent of my influence on the world is. We talk about hula hoop. Imagine a hula hoop around yourself. Everything inside that is yours. Everything outside that is not. I was listening to a speaker, and I think it was an AA speaker, actually, but I'm not positive. And he was talking with his sponsor about boundaries. And he asked his sponsor, like, how do I know what's mine and what's not mine? And his sponsor touched his skin and said, "It's right there." Okay. If it's outside your skin, it's not yours. That's not an easy one. The other big concept that has made such a difference in my life, in the way I am with others, and in particular the way I am with people that I love, is this concept of detachment. And what detachment really is about is knowing what's mine and what's not mine. And when I was applying it to alcoholism early on, detachment was seeing my loved one separately from her disease and the actions that her disease brought to her. To understand that the way she was acting was not because that was her, but because that was her disease acting. And being able then to love the person while still hating the behavior. And that's what, to be honest, and I expressed this in episode 131 or whatever it was, 82, the one with my wife, that I could see her as a person that I loved who was in the grips of a disease. And I can take that same understanding and apply it to other people in my life and other situations in my life. That, I can love my children even when they do and say things that I vehemently disagree with.
Mm-hmm.
I could love my parents even when their actions were triggering me, even when their actions were leading me to feel despair that I was losing them, because I was. And to be able to not put it aside, but to be able to move through that and still love them as people, as they deserved. So I don't know if that wraps it up in a nice bow or not, but that's what I got right now today.
Well, that's very good. You have a lot of good stuff today,
We're
Mr.
in Frisco,
Spencer.
Texas.
Yeah. With the
day after the eclipse, and who knows when this
right.
episode's coming out. But
right. It could be 4 months. It could be 2 months, 1 month, but it'll come out when it's supposed to come out.
And I have patience, and I know it will come out at the right time.
Wow, that's really cool. I'm so glad that you were able to kind of carve time out of your schedule to come by when you're here in the area. God bless you.
I know you had some scheduling issues, and I'm really grateful that you were able to also work through that. And this is like the perfect time, really, because I just dropped my wife at the airport, which meant I was more than halfway to your house.
That's right.
And it was before the rush hour traffic got bad. I mean, there was still some slowdowns.
Yeah, there may be some challenges going back.
It's North Texas. I mean,
yes. All right. So as you know, I think I always ended up with page 164 from the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'll pause it after this, and we'll talk a little bit about, what to call this and all kinds of stuff. But anyway, page 164 from the Big Book says, abandon yourself to God as you understand God. And in fact, you were just summing this up really and what you were talking about there at the end. It says, abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to Him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. Oh no, Spencer, I just realized something. I didn't hit the record button.
I see a red light there. I see a red light there. And I know you were checking timestamps, so I don't believe you. I have done that.
Yeah, I know, and I have too. I wouldn't say that except for you being a podcaster, and I know you've made that mistake before. I've heard you talk about it with, what's his name, Eric?
Eric, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we didn't record a whole episode.
Yeah.
We had to record it over.
And he was none too pleased that,
You know,
yeah. I mean, he was like, oh.
he's got a good program.
He's in Connecticut as well,
Yes,
right?
he is. I have not actually met Eric in person yet.
Oh, really? Okay,
So
go ahead.
we're done, right?
No,
You're still recording.
go.
Now,
Yeah, we're
You're gonna
recording.
hit
Yeah.
the stop button here.
Yeah,
No.
I like this stuff.
So last summer, we had planned a trip to visit some friends that we hadn't seen in a long time,
yeah.
and to visit family. This was like our first post-pandemic, post-funerals trip, right? And we went and we visited my brother, and then we went and visited some friends in Massachusetts, and then we were going to visit some friends in Connecticut, and somebody he was in grad school, and my wife was at her first postdoc in Michigan, and they've been really good family friends for years, and we've seen them over the years, but we hadn't seen them in quite a while. And so we were going to visit them, and then we were going to go visit our son who's living in Connecticut, New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then we were going to come back, and we were going to see my sister, who was out of town the first visit. She and my brother live in basically the same town, and also one of our sons is there now. We were going to see my sister, but while we were in Massachusetts, Amy got COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And we're staying in our friend's condo, right? So she comes to the top of the stairs, said, I got some bad news. I tested positive for COVID. So we immediately moved out of there into a motel and started driving home, because we're not going to bring COVID into the house of our friends when we know we've got it, right? And we just drove home. We stayed in a couple of really flea bag motels on the way home, right? Just because it was like, okay, here, we got to get off the road. Let's find a place where, you want a motel that's got all the rooms facing out, right? So you don't have to go through a lobby or anything.
Right.
So that cut short this dream vacation that we had planned. So we're going to try to do it again this summer. Hopefully we won't get COVID this time. And yeah, so it's just Connecticut, you said Connecticut. And I contacted Eric and I said, hey, we're going to be in Connecticut. We're going to be in New Haven. I think it's New Haven, which is still a couple hours away from where he is. And he said, well, I'm going to be out with a friend on his yacht that those days anyway. I'm not cutting short that to see you. I totally understand. So maybe on this trip, I get a chance to see him. Who knows?
So I would consider that last little snippet there do you ever watch television shows and they say bonus scenes or bonus footage?
Bonus footage.
Right. Everybody just got a little bonus audio, a little bonus gold audio about you and Eric and, meeting up.
Yeah. Anyway.
All right. Well, once again, Mr. Spencer, thank you so much for popping by.
Oh, thank you for making time.
Yeah, of course.
Appreciate that.
God bless you. As always, we enjoy having Mr. Spencer T on the podcast. Once again, Mr. Spencer T, thank you for popping by Studio AA here deep in the heart of Texas. It was good to spend time with you again, and I know the listeners are going to enjoy that as well. I said this on the beginning of the episode, but if you want to find Spencer and hear more of what he has to offer, you want to go to therecoveryshow.com, or, and by the way, I'm going to put that link in the show notes of the website in case you're driving or something like that. Or you can hear his podcasts, which he has plenty of. I think there's over 400 of them or so now, if I'm not mistaken. And if you want to hear plenty, of Spencer's episodes, you want to go over there to The Recovery. You can find The Recovery Show. You can find that where you listen to your podcasts. Now, remember, we don't want you sharing your toothbrush, nor do we want you sharing your gossip, but we would absolutely love for you to pause your device and share that episode with a friend or family member. It may be just what they need today. Now on to some listener feedback. Emily texts in. So I know Emily, and usually I say writes in, but she texted in. She has been on the podcast before. She's actually been down here to visit us when we had some Sober Speak live events. She knows several of the people, the community, I guess I should say, the Sober Speak community, and it's just been a pleasure to know her. Haven't heard from her in a while, and she says, "Hey, John, this is Emily Yu from St. Louis. She says, I got a new phone number and I'm messaging to stay connected. As part of sharing my story recently, I shared how influential Sober Speak, you, and other Texas AA folks were in my life in early sobriety. Reflecting on it recently gave me a chance to be grateful for all the things that I learned about the mettle of AA from staying connected to y'all. Please know that I am now sober because of the podcast, 100%. Well, I don't know about that, Emily, but I'm glad that you have that sentiment about it. She says, no doubt in my mind, the ripple effect of the podcast is wide. And now my husband is clean and sober. And we have a baby who is almost a year old. And she sent me a picture of the adorable baby Henry. That is so cool, Emily. And she says, and I get to serve the women of St. Louis who keep me sober. Thank you, John, for giving away so freely to me. We joked when we recorded the podcast, she recorded an episode with me, that I'd never shared my story before. So like a true alcoholic, I was going all out, big smiley face. She says, I've been able to share my story many more times since that. And what a blessing. As it changes and morphs, the miracle of it all is, quote, very evident in big capital letters. And then she says, after sending that picture of baby Henry, she says, baby Henry attends meetings on a regular basis and has 11 months tomorrow. Big smiley face. Well, I'm glad baby Henry is sober 11 months. I hope he gets that 1-year chip. I'm sure he will. Thanks, Emily, for writing in. And congratulations to you, your husband, and to baby Henry. That's absolutely fantastic. Barry, my friend Barry writes in, and the subject line is 5 years. And Barry says, hi, John. I hope this finds you and your family well. Greetings from the heart of London. I think he's kind of making a fun of my from the heart, deep in the heart of Texas, but I'm not sure. He says, I celebrated 5 years sobriety recently, and I wanted to thank you and the Sober Speak community for helping me make that happen. Congratulations, Barry. That is absolutely fantastic. I remember you in the beginning, and I think it was a little touch and go there for a while, my friend, but I'm glad you're like me. I think the only thing I did right is I just kept trying. I kept coming back in, and finally, one day it just, I don't know, I still can't explain it, but it just took. But then Barry says, one day at a time, my friend, with deep gratitude, big prayer hands, to my Texan legend, John M. And then he always has these smiley faces with big cowboy hats on them. And he says, Barry from across the pond in London town. Barry, very, very congratulations, my friend. That is fantastic. I'm so glad to hear it. All right. Okay, everybody. That one is another how do I say this? Oh, yeah, somebody told me last week, I can't even remember, that I should make, it was Adrian, told me I should make signs and put them up so I don't forget what to say in the end. And you would think that somebody who really knew what they were doing would have the sense to do something like that. But you're working with me. All right, so that is another one in the books. Keep coming back. It works if you work it. May God bless you and keep you until then. I take this one semana, 1 week, right, at a time. I hope to be back next week. You never can tell. We all just have limited time here and limited energy. And when I say limited time, either limited time in a week or limited time on this earth, both, right? So anyway, I didn't mean to go off on that tangent, but here we are. Anyway, God bless you all. Love you. Thanks for listening in today, and hope to be back next week. God bless.